Corey Day Desmond was born March 18, 1980, at Torrance Memorial Hospital. And right from the start, she was the center of attention because she had to fight to survive. Due to a hole in her diaphragm, she had to undergo multiple surgeries. She was only given a 20% chance of survival. And miraculously, she not only survived, but she thrived. Friends and family of Desmond knew her as a smart, self-confident young woman, unafraid to express her opinion, who was energetic and full of affection for those she cared about, who were many. Desmond graduated from North Torrance High School and earned a master's degree in criminal justice from Long Beach State. Unsure of her calling in life, she changed her mind and decided to become a teacher. Her goal was to teach autistic children. A week after her death, a notice came in the mail that she had earned her teaching credential. She was loved by many and a friend to all. She was sweet at times but could be tough as nails. She could command a bar full of patrons when she wanted, and all the while be singing one of her favorite karaoke songs, such as Black Velvet or These Boots Were Made for Walking. And once again, being the center of attention. It was that secondary family that Corey acquired while working in those various establishments that kept her going back despite what her family wanted her to do. In 2009, Corey worked in a bar. On Saturday, February 14th, she had a shift that ended at 9:30 p.m. She then walked 2 blocks to the popular Bar Street Lounge. Many employees of this bar knew Corey as she had friends working there. She was caught on surveillance cameras helping her friends at the bar. She left there only after closing, around 2 a.m. None of her friends saw her after that. On Monday, February 16th, at approximately 2:20 p.m., the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office received a terrifying call. About 100 miles from the bar where people last saw Corey, a driver stopped to take snow chains off the wheels. The man felt a strong, unpleasant smell as soon as he exited the car. He thought the source of the stench was an animal that got hit by a car but still decided to check. Not far from the car, he found something strange. He saw a black plastic garbage bag with a woman's body inside. The man ran out into the road in a panic, stopping cars and asking to call the police as his phone's battery was dead. They identified the victim by fingerprints and driver's license. It was 28-year-old Corey Day Desmond. Subjected to a brutal attack, the woman died from strangulation. She had a lot of bruises on her face and neck and injuries to the back of her head. Corey tried to fight back as she had several defense wounds. Although unable to determine the exact time of death, the medical experts said Corey was on the street for about 12 to 36 hours before the man found her. Corey's pants were unbuttoned and pulled to her knees, but no signs of intimate contact were found. The first conclusion that investigators came to was that the place where the driver found Corey's body was not the place of her death. The criminal left her body by the side of the road, hoping it would take time to find it. Before the man found her body, the rain destroyed all possible evidence. Reporting bad news to the families of the dead or missing is perhaps the hardest thing in the work of a policeman. At that time, Corey was living with her grandmother. The news about the granddaughter's body found in a garbage bag shocked the woman. And this news was no less devastating for Mark, Corey's father. Mark knew perfectly well how the system worked. Sometimes the police delay the investigation for many months because they need a warrant to conduct searches, interrogations, and fingerprinting. There are cases when time-consuming bureaucracy slows down the process of solving a crime. Therefore, Mark decided not to sit and wait for the police to find the person who deprived him of his daughter. He decided to act. He said love for his daughter gave him the strength to look for the criminal. Mark found Corey's Jeep Wrangler in an alley next to the bar where she worked. He also discovered that Corey disappeared on the night of February 15th, but unfortunately, no one knew about it. Grandma did not panic because Corey was already an adult and could stay overnight with a friend or friends. In addition, she often worked late into the night and came home when her grandmother was already asleep. Investigators went to the bar where Desmond worked to find possible witnesses or leads. They talked to other employees and learned that Corey finished her shift at 9:30 p.m. and then went to another bar. She often did that. Her friends worked at that bar, and Corey often visited them at the end of her shift. She helped at the bar or chatted with friends while sitting at the counter. Besides, it brought her extra tips. Bar visitors knew her face well, and many perceived Corey as another employee. Surveillance cameras confirmed the words of the visitors. They captured the girl helping her friends at the bar. Unfortunately, a bartender's job is not only to pour drinks and entertain the interlocutors. Sometimes, after drinking alcohol, some people stop controlling their emotions and their behavior becomes inappropriate. That evening, Corey was unlucky enough to meet such a person. According to eyewitnesses, she argued with some man who behaved provocatively. He bothered women and unceremoniously touched them, making unflattering compliments. While everyone was silent and did not dare to put this man in his place, Corey stood up for the bar's visitors. In other words, the girl explained to the man that he was not welcome there. The violent guest was furious but still agreed to leave. Corey continued to help her friends and made drinks at the bar as if nothing had happened. That evening, she consumed alcohol, but it did not affect her behavior. After 2 a.m., she left the bar alone and planned to go home. But as we now know, a man found Corey's lifeless body 100 miles from the bar the next day. Mark gave the police all the information he could find. Through television, he appealed to everyone to report any crucial information for the investigation. Meanwhile, the police identified the man Corey quarreled with before her death. During a conversation with investigators, the man said he did not know who Corey Desmond was. However, he did not deny having a big fight with the girl in a bar on February 14th. The man said alcohol made him uncontrollable, confirming that they kicked him out of the bar. Right after that, he went home to sleep. The suspect denied any involvement in the crime. He agreed to take a polygraph test and let the police search his house and car. They carefully examined the suspect's car. After all, there could have been traces like blood stains, hair, or something belonging to Corey. The car was dirty both inside and outside, and yet forensic experts did not find any evidence there. While searching the man's house, they found nothing indicating his involvement in the crime. The last hope of the investigators to catch the man in a lie was a polygraph test, but the man passed it without much difficulty, answering all the questions of the police. In addition, his wife confirmed that he came home before 2 a.m. and immediately went to bed. Corey left the bar around 2 a.m., which means this man was not involved in her death. Thus, the police excluded him from the list of suspects, but the problem was that they had no other persons of interest in this investigation. They studied Corey's personal life, trying to find out if she had enemies who could wish her harm. Investigators found out another strange detail. The owner of the bar where Corey worked said that that night, she came and asked for permission to use the toilet. But since the bar was closed, he refused the girl's request and advised her to go home. It was about 2:20 in the morning. What happened next remained a mystery because Corey never got in the car and did not go home. Investigators assumed that she had been abducted or assaulted near her place of work. However, the bar's surveillance cameras did not record this, and there were no witnesses on the street at such a late hour. At the time of Corey's death, her blood alcohol content was more than 4 times the legal limit for driving. It was unclear whether she planned to use her car or was looking for other ways to get home. Unfortunately, she did not meet anyone who would help her that night. A month later, the investigation reached a dead end. The police checked all the versions and clues but found no new suspects. Corey's father, Mark, wasn't going to give up. He rented 3 billboards on Artesia Boulevard in Redondo Beach. The billboards contained a photo of his daughter with the question, "Who killed Corey Day Desmond?" The man offered a $15,000 reward for any information helpful to the police. "I'm going to keep them up there to let people know the guy is still out there," Mark Desmond said. "Maybe it will save somebody." To some extent, this story is similar to the one of Alexandra Kemp. The latter's father, Roger, did everything to find the criminal, and billboards played a crucial role in solving the crime. Information about Corey periodically appeared on 50 electronic billboards. Eventually, it brought results. In May 2009, the phone rang at the police station. A woman named Tiffany saw one of the billboards with a photo of Corey. Thanks to this woman, the police were able to solve this case. Tiffany spoke very quietly. The woman was experiencing stress and severe fright. She rambled as if she didn't know where to start. Then she finally focused and said, "Hello, my name is Tiffany. I think my boyfriend, Tony Lopez Perez, killed that bartender girl, Corey Day Desmond. Please check him. He's behaving strangely, but I'll tell you more when we meet." Tiffany called several times to arrange a meeting with the detective. During their conversation in the park, the woman told him about her suspicions. According to her, on February 14th, she and Tony planned a romantic Valentine's Day dinner. She spent the whole evening preparing for a date. Tiffany took the children to their grandparents, visited a beauty salon, and bought a new red dress. Tony loved it when she wore red clothes. It drove him crazy. The guy was working that day but had to return home around 11:30 p.m. Tiffany waited for Tony almost all night. The woman tried to contact him, but he did not answer calls and messages. Tony returned home at 4:30 in the morning and, as if nothing had happened, said he was too drunk to go home. He said he fell asleep in his car. Tiffany mentioned that Tony rarely cleaned the interior of his car. However, after a few days, he bought a whole set of cleaning products. He washed the car thoroughly, not letting her help. The guy's behavior seemed strange, but at that moment, she did not attach much importance to it. A few days later, Tony sold his white Dodge for almost nothing and bought another car. He also changed his phone number for no apparent reason. A little later, they had a joint trip to Big Bear Lake. They chatted along the way and everything seemed normal until Tony suddenly stopped the car on the side of the road. He turned to Tiffany and asked her, "Do you think this dead girl, what was her name, the bartender, was dumped here? I'm almost 100% sure that the police found her body here." Tony Lopez Perez and Tiffany were lived together for about 4 years. They had a 6-year-old son together, but they never married. He was a hardworking man and got along well with everyone. He has never had any problems with the law. Perez came from a large family with 8 siblings. His parents grew up in the LA area, and Perez attended high school in Manhattan Beach. Tony's absence on the day of Corey's death, cleaning the car and urgently selling it, a strange trip, and an equally strange comment about where the police found her body, a change of phone number, and odd behavior. Putting all these facts together, Tiffany realized that Tony could be the one who took the life of Corey Desmond. She didn't want to believe it. The investigators decided to talk to Tony and went to his house. To prevent him from suspecting anything, Tiffany agreed to play along with the police, not telling him anything about this conversation. It looked as if they were conducting a routine interview of people to find witnesses in the Corey Desmond case. Tony looked calm, like a person with nothing to hide. He wasn't nervous while answering all the questions. He said he didn't know her, mentioning he had only seen Corey in the newspapers. However, to arrest Tony Lopez Perez for taking the life of Corey, they needed hard evidence. Thus, the police found the new owner of the Dodge that Tony sold shortly after the news of Corey's death. The new owner confirmed that Tony sold him his car for a low price. He allowed the police to check the vehicle for any evidence. Tiffany said Tony cleaned the interior thoroughly before selling his car. However, when the experts applied luminol and used an ultraviolet lamp, it became evident why Tony Lopez Perez got rid of his car. The interior of the car lit up in bright blue. Police asked Tony to come to the police station. They didn't tell him anything about the find, so he wouldn't run away. At first, he claimed he had never seen Corey, but later changed his testimony, saying he saw her near the bar and whistled at her. As soon as the police noticed that the man was changing his testimony, they showed him photos of the car he had sold and said that they had found crucial evidence there. This time, Tony claimed to have seen Corey outside the bar. Standing under a street lamp, she suddenly lost consciousness and fell on the sidewalk. He tried to help her, but she did not regain consciousness. Then he started slapping Corey on the cheeks. Corey opened her eyes and started screaming. She told him to get out and asked him to let her go. According to Tony, he got scared, put his hands over her mouth, and accidentally strangled her. Fearing he would get blamed for Corey's death, he put her body in the backseat of his car and drove home. Perez said he woke up during the night and went outside to see if it was a nightmare. "I opened the door and it was not a nightmare," Perez told detectives. It was true. Perez said he went back inside and tried to get some sleep. In the morning, he went to work with Desmond's body still in the back seat. At the end of the working day, he placed her body in 2 garbage bags, took it to a remote area, and left it next to the side of the road. According to Tony's story, what he did to Corey was an accident. He claimed that he was drunk and scared. He accidentally strangled her in a state of panic, but Corey's injuries suggested otherwise. She had severe injuries on the back of her head, bruises on her face and neck, and defense wounds on her hands. Moreover, Corey's pants were down to her knees. Tony Perez was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The next day, he showed the police where he dumped Corey's body. In addition to Tony's confession, they now had the results of DNA tests. Corey's blood matched the blood found in the car that Tony sold immediately after committing the crime. At the 2011 trial, Coroner Jack Sheridan testified to the multiple contusions to the victim's head, the evidence of strangulation, and the blunt force trauma to her face. Sheridan also said she had scratches on her body that suggested the criminal dragged her after her death. Based on Corey's injuries, prosecutors said Perez assaulted her and tried to force her into intimacy in the early morning of February 15, 2009. Corey resisted. Unable to get what he wanted, Perez strangled her. Tiffany Ware testified during the trial. She told the San Bernardino County jury that her former boyfriend, Tony Lopez Perez, had an insatiable appetite for sex in January and February 2009. Even though they were making love almost every day, Ware said Perez was still not satisfied. Tiffany also told the court that Tony had twice engaged in intimacy with her against her will. It happened after the birth of their son and with an interval of about a month. Both incidents occurred when she was fast asleep on the couch after taking painkillers due to severe back pain. Perez, who chose not to testify at the trial, made his first statements to the court during his sentencing. He said he was taught to love and respect those around him, but that he veered off course at times. I forgot the key lessons I was taught about in life, which make me a man, a father, a loving uncle to many, and a responsible person who supports his family that I so love, Perez said. In the end, I fell short. He generally stuck to the story his attorney Andrew Hanel presented at the trial, that he was scared and didn't mean to hurt Desmond. Hanel argued to a jury of 6 men and 6 women that Perez found her passed out on the sidewalk. He said he tried to calm her down and didn't mean to kill her. I should have thought before acting, Perez said. I should have stepped back and cleared my head. Fear took over. I was so scared, so careless. Corey's father, Mark Desmond, said his daughter had a beautiful future ahead of her before her life was cut short at the age of 28. Tony Perez should live the rest of his miserable life knowing he killed his own children's hopes and dreams at the same time he was killing Corey, her father said. He embodies all the characteristics that women in society fear. Just before sentencing, Perez asked God in the court to show him mercy. My very deepest apologies to the Desmond family and to my own family. I have brought such hurt and sorrow to the Desmonds that will forever shape their life. I hope he never gets out in the street again, said Desmond's grandmother Beverly. I hope he suffers as much as she suffered. In July 2011, a jury of 6 men and 6 women found 36-year-old Tony Lopez Perez guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Corey Desmond's family expressed gratitude to Tiffany Ware, thanks to whom the police solved this case. If it hadn't been for her, I don't think they would have ever found out it was him, said Leslie Schwab, a family friend who attended every day of the trial, along with about a dozen others in San Bernardino County. Holly Lynn Bobo was born on October 12, 1990, in a small American town called Darden, Tennessee. It was a quiet, peaceful place with just a few hundred residents far away from big cities. Holly lived there with her parents and older brother. The family loved spending time outdoors. They'd go hiking, fishing, and swim in the little creeks around town. Holly also had a passion for singing and often took part in her local church services. After high school, Holly decided to pursue a career in healthcare and become a nurse, so she enrolled in the University of Tennessee's campus in a neighboring town. By 2011, at the age of 20, Holly was dedicating most of her time to her studies. she also had a boyfriend. The couple had been dating since high school, and they were making big plans for their future together. Holly still lived with her parents since her university was only a few minutes' drive away. Plus, her father had built their home himself, and it meant a lot to the family, so Holly wasn't in any rush to move out. On April 13th, Holly woke up around 4:30 a.m. to get ready for class. A few hours later, her parents left for work, while her brother was still asleep. At about 7:30, Holly's boyfriend called her to tell her that he planned to go hunting on a large piece of land owned by Holly's grandmother and wanted to make sure her family wouldn't mind. They chatted for a few minutes, and Holly said she'd be leaving for university soon. A while later, one of Holly's neighbors stepped outside and was about to get into his car when he heard a piercing scream coming from the direction of her house. Thinking that something might have happened to a neighbor, he told his mother about what had just happened, and she called Holly's mom. Holly's mother tried to call her daughter, but Holly didn't pick up. Growing concerned, she decided to head back home to make sure everything was okay. Holly's brother, who was still asleep at the time, hadn't heard the scream. But shortly after, their dog in the backyard started barking loudly. That's when he decided to look out the window to see what was going on. Holly's brother looked out and saw her standing in the garage with a man beside her. He didn't recognize him because the man was wearing camouflage, but his first thought was that it might be Holly's boyfriend. The brother knew about his plans to go hunting on their grandmother's land, and he often wore camouflage. Since the garage was too far from his window, Holly's brother couldn't hear what they were talking about, but he could tell from her tone that she seemed upset. He decided to call his mom and ask if Holly was planning to go to class that day or if she'd invited her boyfriend over instead. But his mother interrupted him, yelling that the man wasn't her boyfriend. She then said something quite unexpected. She told him to grab a gun and shoot the man immediately. Shocked, he asked if she was serious, and she replied yes before hanging up. When he looked back out the window, he saw Holly walking toward the woods near their property, with the man in camouflage holding her by the hand. This time, he noticed the man was much taller and broader than her boyfriend. At that moment, he was still confused about what was happening. He tried calling Holly, but she didn't answer. He also called her boyfriend, but he didn't pick up either. Meanwhile, their mom had already called the police. But since she was working in a neighboring county, the call was directed to a different police station. Soon after, her son called her back to tell her that Holly had walked into the woods with this man. He then grabbed his gun and went outside, but by then Holly was nowhere in sight. However, he did notice splatters of blood inside the garage and immediately called the police. Officers arrived at the house within minutes, but by that time there was no trace of Holly. Her brother showed them the blood in the garage and described the strange man he'd seen. Aside from the camouflage, the man was also wearing a cap, so he couldn't get a clear look at his face. Still, he remembered that the man had long dark hair that reached down to his back. He also mentioned that he couldn't make out what Holly and the man were talking about, but he noticed the man had a fairly deep voice. The whole situation seemed strange to the police, but they didn't rush to start a full investigation. The local police department had very little experience handling cases like this, so they weren't sure what to do. In those critical first hours, they didn't search the woods, secure the house or the blood-stained garage, or even talk to the neighbors. When Holly's parents returned home, they quickly realized that the officers weren't putting in any real effort to find their daughter. After repeated pleas from the family to begin a proper investigation, officers finally organized a search of the woods, spoke with neighbors, and brought in forensic experts to examine the blood in the garage. They also confirmed that Holly's boyfriend couldn't have been the man she was seen with. Besides the fact that her brother had noted the man looked very different, the police verified that her boyfriend was out hunting at the time of her disappearance. The search in the woods turned up nothing, so investigators requested GPS data from Holly's phone. It showed her moving north for about 30 minutes before heading back in the opposite direction. The last signal came from a spot in the woods, just a few hundred yards from her house. After that, the phone seemed to have been turned off. Police went to search that area and soon found the phone. Its SIM card was removed, but there was no sign of Holly herself. The search continued for several days, but led nowhere. Meanwhile, something strange started happening. People in their small town began finding Holly's belongings scattered around. First, someone found her lunch container on the street, then a receipt with her name on it. Another resident came across her school card. It was all pretty strange, but the police still couldn't figure out who was leaving these items. They considered that it might have been Holly herself, or maybe the person who took her. With no progress in finding Holly, investigators turned to the list of convicted criminals in the area. Soon, their attention shifted to a local man named Terry, who had multiple assault charges on his record. Digging deeper, they found that his victims shared striking similarities with Holly in both age and appearance. Terry also matched the height and build description of the man seen with Holly. So investigators began looking into his possible involvement in her disappearance. They obtained a warrant to search his home, but found no evidence. Next, they set up a wiretap, monitoring his calls and conversations for several weeks. But they still couldn't uncover anything that connected him to Holly's case. The investigators continued looking into other suspects and kept expanding their search area. With each passing week, more and more volunteers joined the effort. But despite their combined efforts, the search operations brought no results. For the next several months, there was barely any progress in Holly's case. Eventually, the police called off the ground search, shifting their focus entirely to investigating potential suspects. But this didn't lead anywhere either. Holly's family was devastated. They had no clue what had happened to her, where she might be, or if she was even alive. They also blamed the local police department, feeling the authorities hadn't put in enough effort, especially in those crucial first days. Looking back, the family realized the police had taken almost no action in the first 72 hours, which are often critical in missing persons cases. Despite their frustration, complaints, and constant push for a more active investigation, Holly's fate remained unknown. This went on for 3 years until something unexpected happened. In March 2014, police arrested a local man named Dylan, known to authorities for his involvement with illegal substances, on charges of unlawful weapon possession. During his interrogation, he made an unexpected confession, claiming he had seen Holly after she was abducted. According to Dylan, on the day of Holly's disappearance, he had gone to his brother Zach's house to pick up a car. When he entered the living room, he saw his brother, their mutual friend Jason, and another person, Holly. She was sitting in a chair, looking terrified. Dylan claimed that Zach told him he had kidnapped Holly, assaulted her, and even filmed it. As for what happened afterward, Dylan said only that she was killed soon after the abduction, insisting he had no part in the murder. He also mentioned that his brother had been wearing camouflage that day. The police brought Zach and Jason in for questioning, but both denied any involvement in Holly's disappearance. Investigators also searched their homes for any evidence or the alleged video of Holly's assault, but found nothing. Shortly after this, a woman contacted the police with another unexpected story. She claimed that she had previously lived with a man named Jeffrey, and one day he had shown her a clip from a video where a man assaulted a young woman. Jeffrey told her that the woman in the video was Holly and that the man doing that was Zach. He also mentioned that the video had been recorded by his brother, Mark. Detectives met with this woman and asked if she'd be willing to call Jeffrey while they recorded the conversation. She agreed, and during the call, she brought up the video. From Jeffrey's responses, detectives felt certain he really had shown her the recording. Shortly after, Jeffrey and his brother were both arrested. During questioning, both denied any involvement in Holly's disappearance and claimed not to know anything about the video. When detectives played Jeffrey the recording of his conversation with the woman, he said he had probably misunderstood her question. He added that his ex-wife's name was also Holly, suggesting he might have misinterpreted what she meant. The police searched the brothers' homes and examined all their devices, but were unable to find the video. They also found no evidence linking the brothers to the other 3 suspects. In the end, they had to release the brothers, as the witness statement alone was not enough. However, as investigators continued trying to establish connections between these people and Zach, they uncovered another suspect. They found that a man named Shane had been in contact with Zach on the day of Holly's disappearance and decided to question him. They suspected that Zach might have asked him for help in disposing of the body, and during the interrogation, Shane confirmed that he indeed knew where Holly's remains were hidden. Detectives offered him full immunity in exchange for testifying against others involved and leading them to the body. Shane agreed, but for some reason, he was ultimately unable to locate Holly's remains. In the end, the investigators revoked the deal and began considering other ways to obtain confessions or some new evidence against these suspects. While investigators were pursuing this lead, they received an unexpected call. In September 2014, a group of men went hunting in a forest about 19 miles from Holly's home. One of them spotted a large bucket hidden in the brush and decided to take a look. When he turned it over, he found a human skull and immediately reported it to the police. Forensic experts arrived on the scene and collected partial remains, which they sent to the lab for identification. Right away, detectives suspected these might be Holly's, and dental records quickly confirmed it. The remains had been out in the woods for 3 years, so finding out exactly what happened was nearly impossible. But one thing was certain. A bullet hole in the skull confirmed she'd been shot. Now, there was no question. Holly's death was a homicide. With the case now officially classified as a murder, detectives zeroed in on their 4 main suspects: Zach, his brother Dylan, their friend Jason, and their acquaintance Shane. The detectives decided to focus on Jason and brought him in for questioning. At first, he kept denying any involvement, but when police told him that he could face a life sentence for murder, Jason agreed to testify against Zach. According to Jason, on the day of Holly's disappearance, he went over to Zach's house to buy drugs. Along with Zach, his brother and Shane were also there. They told him they had killed Holly and now needed to get rid of the evidence. Zach then showed him Holly's body, wrapped in a blanket, lying in the trunk of his car. Zach asked Jason to help dispose of the body, and he agreed. While Shane burned Holly's belongings in a barrel, he and Zach drove to the Tennessee River Bridge to throw her into the water. But when they pulled her out of the trunk, Zach realized she was still alive and shot her. Fearing the gunshot might attract attention, Zach quickly changed his plan. He put Holly's body back in the car and drove off to find another hiding place, dropping Jason off along the way. Sometime later, when Zach reached out to Jason, he mentioned he'd hidden Holly's body in the woods. But as it turned out, the location he described wasn't where her remains were actually found. Jason's story about the abduction also raised some questions. According to him, Zach, his brother, and Shane initially went to Holly's brother's house to teach him how to produce illegal substances. There, they saw Holly and apparently mentioned their plans to her. She became outraged, yelling at them to leave. Worried she'd expose their illegal activities, the trio decided to abduct her. This version seemed odd for several reasons. First, Holly's brother claimed he had never been interested in making illegal substances and had never discussed it with any of the suspects. Second, when he woke up, he saw only one person with his sister, and that person didn't match Zach's description. The only one fitting what he remembered was Shane. Where the other 2 suspects were at that moment remained unclear. Jason also revealed that after abducting Holly, the 3 men took her to an old barn belonging to Shane's grandmother, where they assaulted her. It's worth mentioning that the check with Holly's name on it and her school card were found less than 100 yards from Shane's house. As for Zach and his brother, the police managed to find several pieces of circumstantial evidence linking them to the crime. Right after Holly's abduction, multiple neighbors reported seeing a white pickup speeding away from her house, and Zach owned a similar truck. His vehicle was also spotted by a surveillance camera near her home. Zach's ex-girlfriend told investigators that he had occasionally threatened her, saying something like, "I'll tie you up like Holly and no one will ever see you again." Several other witnesses claimed that he had told them, directly or indirectly, about his involvement in Holly's disappearance. Police also learned that Zach had threatened his brother, warning him that he'd end up in the same hole next to her if he cooperated with the investigation. Detectives also learned from a local resident that after the murder, Shane and Zach offered him a gun in exchange for illegal substances, and he accepted the deal. He later threw the weapon into the water, where police eventually recovered it. However, there were no fingerprints or DNA on it, so experts couldn't link it to the crime. As the prosecution prepared for trial, gathering all the evidence, the case took yet another unexpected turn. Shane, who had initially agreed to cooperate with the police but then failed to lead them to Holly's remains, was found dead in a hotel room. Authorities concluded he had killed himself, though the exact reason remained unknown. His lawyer blamed the investigators, insisting they had threatened Shane with a long prison sentence. The suspects' trials were held separately, starting with Zach's. His trial began in September 2017, 6 years after Holly's murder. Though Zach pled not guilty, Jason's testimony, along with other pieces of circumstantial evidence, weighed heavily against him. After a few weeks, the jury found him guilty of murder, sentencing him to life in prison, along with 2 additional 25-year terms for kidnapping and assault. In January the following year, Dylan went to trial. He decided to take a plea deal, admitting to helping with the kidnapping and murder, though the deal didn't require him to testify against anyone else or provide any specific details. He was sentenced to 35 years with no chance of parole. As for Jason, due to his cooperation, he received an 8-year sentence with the opportunity for early release. So Holly's case was officially closed. But even after that, many questions remained. The prosecution lacked a single solid piece of evidence directly linking the suspects to her kidnapping. No fingerprints, DNA, or other evidence was ever found that Holly had been in Zach's car or home. The suspects' families and defense insisted that the entire case was built on a fabrication. They claimed police first coerced Dylan into making a false statement and later did the same with Jason, threatening him with prison time if he refused. Dylan and Jason's stories also didn't fully align. Initially, Dylan claimed he had gone to his brother's house that day to pick up a car and saw Holly and Jason there, but Jason stated he arrived after they'd already put Holly's body in the trunk and even alleged that Dylan had been directly involved in the abduction. There was also another questionable detail. According to investigators, the person who led Holly into the woods was likely Shane, as he was the only one whose height and build matched her brother's description. However, Shane had short, light hair, while Holly's brother recalled seeing a man with long, dark hair. A former Tennessee Bureau of Investigation officer, who worked on the case in its early stages, shared a few more curious insights. He mentioned that they requested cell tower data to track the location of each suspect's phone, but none of them appeared to be near Holly's house. However, since cell tower data only provides a rough estimate within a relatively large area, it wasn't definitive. The investigators also revealed that they found a palm print on Holly's car that didn't match hers, her family's, or any of her friends. They compared it to all the suspects as well, but none of them matched either. Yet, there was no certainty that this print was even relevant to the case. Zach's attorney argued that a much more likely suspect was a man named Terry, whom police investigated during the initial months. As we recall, they questioned him, searched his house, and even placed a wiretap on him, but found no evidence to confirm his involvement. Terry's wife claimed she was home with him that morning while he was installing a new bathtub, but the defense attorney argued that her alibi might have been inaccurate. He said that she was actually at work that morning and that Terry had called her there. When investigators checked with the store where he supposedly bought the tub, they couldn't confirm the sale. Adding to suspicions, right after Holly's disappearance, Terry cut off his long, dark hair. According to the attorney, not only could Terry's wife have faked an alibi for him, but she might have even helped him commit his crimes. Terry had several convictions for assaults on other women, and in some cases, his wife allegedly helped him. Lastly, forensic experts couldn't completely rule out a match between Terry's palm print and the one found on Holly's car. While they could confidently rule out everyone else, they couldn't do the same for Terry. Despite all of this, the prosecution remained firm, insisting that the suspect's guilt was proven beyond doubt, with too many circumstantial factors pointing to their involvement. Jason served only 3 years before being released early. But just a few months later, he was arrested again on weapons charges, putting him back behind bars to await trial. Then, at the beginning of 2024, Jason made an unexpected statement. He claimed that his previous testimony had been fabricated, and he never actually saw Holly that day. According to him, he made up the whole story to avoid a life sentence, striking a deal with the police based on lies. Following this, Zach filed a motion for a new trial. But in late September 2024, it was denied. The judge ruled that Jason's statements alone were insufficient to overturn the case, as there were still other circumstantial pieces of evidence against Zach. It's worth noting that at the time Jason recanted his testimony, he was still awaiting trial for his weapons charges. About a month before the judge ruled on Zach's appeal, Jason was sentenced to 19 years in prison. This timing raises questions about his motives. His sudden reversal might have been an attempt to influence his own case and potentially lessen his sentence. As it stands, all three men are still in prison, and the only real shot at a retrial depends on whether their lawyers can find new evidence that either clears their names or points the finger at someone else. So far, though, there's been no progress on that front, and the prosecution insists that all three are clearly guilty. On the afternoon of June 8, 2018, while navigating the waters near the Long Island Strait, a group of fishermen aboard a commercial vessel stumbled upon an unsettling sight. Bobbing in the waves was the lifeless form of a man. Drawing closer, they discerned unmistakable signs of distress on the body. Waste no time, they promptly alerted the Coast Guard to their grim discovery. Responding swiftly, law enforcement officials arrived at the scene to retrieve the body, revealing a young man with perplexing bruises and abrasions. Identified later as Spencer McFord, his disappearance alongside his girlfriend, Sophia McKenna, just days prior, had sent ripples of concern through the community. Ascertaining the circumstances surrounding Spencer's tragic end became paramount, prompting authorities to subject his remains to a thorough examination. The subsequent autopsy yielded the distressing conclusion of drowning as the cause of death. Yet, despite meticulous scrutiny, forensic experts uncovered no evidence of foul play. All injuries were deemed consistent with immersion in water. However, the revelation of Spencer's fate merely deepened the mystery surrounding the series of disappearances that befell the region that fateful weekend. Two other men met similar tragic ends, their bodies discovered submerged in the waters. Initially dismissed as unfortunate accidents, these incidents raised troubling questions. Amidst the uncertainty, one haunting detail lingered: the absence of Sophia McKenna. Vanished without a trace, her fate intertwined with Spencer's, in a narrative fraught with unanswered queries. This enigmatic saga unfurled on the ominous night of May 27, 2018, in the quaint town of Grown, nestled within Connecticut's northeastern expanse. Revered for its storied history and tales of spectral apparitions, the lighthouse bore witness to a tragedy that transcended mortal understanding. Legend spoke of Ernie, the lighthouse's inaugural keeper, whose love lost drove him to a fatal plunge from its heights. It was to this hallowed ground that Spencer and Sophia ventured, their fates entwined with the mysteries that shrouded the ancient structure. Ever since the rumors began circulating about strange happenings at the lighthouse, both locals and tourists alike have recounted peculiar occurrences. Reports range from doors and windows mysteriously opening to bedsheets slipping off beds without any logical explanation. Sailors have recounted tales of radios switching on autonomously, and ships inexplicably becoming unmoored from the shore. These stories have propelled the lighthouse into the spotlight, featuring prominently in numerous television programs dedicated to the paranormal. Despite the speculative nature of these claims, the allure of the lighthouse's enigmatic atmosphere continues to draw people in. Spencer and Sophia were no exception. They had harbored a long-standing desire to explore the mysteries of this iconic landmark. Setting out on the eve of Memorial Day, they embarked on an adventure that would soon take a troubling turn. On Saturday, the 27th, Sophia's friend Austin attempted to reach her, only to be met with silence. Initially unconcerned, he assumed she was simply sleeping in. However, as hours passed without any response, worry crept in. Contacting Sophia's mother, Michelle, Austin discovered a string of missed calls from an unfamiliar number on Michelle's phone. Upon attempting to return the calls, they reached Spencer's voicemail instead, sparking further concern. With anxiety mounting, Michelle and Austin sprang into action, scouring the area for any sign of their missing loved ones. Austin called local hospitals, while Michelle wasted no time in filing a missing persons report with the authorities. Meanwhile, Spencer's family shared in their apprehension, noting his absence from a family gathering and his failure to respond to their attempts at communication. Their search led them to Spencer's apartment, but it yielded no clues. Spencer's mother recalled their conversation at 10 p.m., hinting at his intentions to meet Sophia despite previous plans. As the pieces of the puzzle slowly fell into place, the mystery surrounding their disappearance deepened, leaving both families grasping for answers in the darkness. When Spencer bid her good night, realizing something had happened, prompting his family to alert the authorities around 6:30 p.m. regarding his and his girlfriend's sudden disappearance. Swiftly, the police initiated their search for the missing duo. Austin reached out to the sheriff, disclosing crucial information about Sophia and Spencer's whereabouts the prior night, admitting his consent for Sophia's visit there. He elaborated on discovering a Snapchat video posted by Sophia, capturing moments aboard a boat en route to the lighthouse. The footage depicted a jovial scene, with Spencer rowing towards the destination. Subsequently, Sophia uploaded the video playfully posing by the lighthouse's concrete barrier, embellished with a "Do Not Cross" sign. The events following this snapshot remain shrouded in mystery. Mere minutes after the upload, at 2:05 a.m., Spencer's phone initiated a series of calls to Michelle, Sophia's mother, persisting at intervals of 2.06, 2.08, and culminating at 2.09. Michelle, deep in slumber, missed all calls, with no voicemails or texts left, and no record of contact with emergency services. The visual evidence confirmed the couple's presence at the lighthouse, prompting the dispatch of 20 Coast Guard units. A coordinated effort ensued, with the Coast Guard, firefighters, and police scouring the area by air, sea, and land. The first significant discovery was Sophia's abandoned car on the university campus, accompanied by her cell phone. Simultaneously, the Coast Guard recovered Spencer's t-shirt, as seen in the video, hinting at its use for securing the boat. The search persisted relentlessly through the night and into the following day. As the storm rolled in, state authorities made the difficult decision to halt the search for the missing young couple, Spencer and Sophia, until new leads or signs surfaced. This announcement sent shockwaves through their families and friends, who refused to give up hope. They took matters into their own hands, plastering the city with posters and spreading the word about Spencer and Sophia's disappearance. Their plea to the public for any information fell largely on deaf ears, despite the bustling streets at the time of their vanishing yielding no witnesses. In the midst of the family's relentless search efforts, questions swirled unanswered. Why did Sophia repeatedly call her mother? And why the hesitation to leave a voicemail or contact the authorities? Speculation ran rampant. Could their disappearance be tied to their recent brush with the law, having stolen a boat and ventured to the forbidden lighthouse? Sophia's prior legal entanglements and Spencer's DUI arrest might have fueled her reluctance to involve the police again. Perhaps she sought solace in reaching out to her mother instead. But the complexities of Sophia's state of mind at the time remain a mystery, clouded by panic and uncertainty. Meanwhile, detectives worked tirelessly to piece together the events of May 26, 2018. The day began like any other, bathed in sunshine and the promise of a festive weekend ahead. Memorial Day celebrations loomed, yet for Sophia and Spencer, the day took a sinister turn. Spencer's work shift ended at 7 p.m., after which their plans dissolved into a haze of uncertainty. Where did they go? Who did they meet? The details are scarce, save for Sophia's car found parked at the University of Connecticut campus around 2 a.m. For reasons unknown, Sophia left her cell phone in the car, whether due to forgetfulness or a drained battery. The couple embarked on their ill-fated journey aboard a small sailboat, its weight a mere 14 pounds, equipped only with oars. With Spencer's confidence in his aquatic abilities bolstering their resolve, they pushed off from shore, navigating perilously close to rocky outcrops, en route to the infamous lighthouse. Their reckless disregard for safety, compounded by the absence of proper equipment, underscored the perilous nature of their venture. Monday evening brought a breakthrough in the search efforts when a police helicopter scouring the coastline spotted a white and blue sailboat wedged among the rocks, coated in a film of dust, some 12 kilometers west of the lighthouse. While authorities suspected this vessel to be the missing sailboat from the campus, potentially used by Spencer and Sophia, conclusive evidence remained elusive. Fingerprints discovered on the boat offered tantalizing leads, yet their analysis and subsequent findings remained undisclosed to the public, shrouding the investigation in further ambiguity. Moreover, conflicting reports initially labeled the vessel as a kayak, only to later clarify it as a white sailboat adorned with red markings. In their quest for answers, investigators delved into the backgrounds of Sophia McKenna and Spencer Mugford. Born on March 7, 1996, in North Stonington, Connecticut, Sophia, then 21, resided in Groton, Connecticut, USA. Raised alongside her siblings Justin and Grace, Sophia cherished her familial bonds, exhibiting a nurturing demeanor toward her younger kin. Despite her tumultuous upbringing, marked by her parents' divorce during her formative years, Sophia remained resilient, her vibrant spirit undimmed by adversity. Yet beneath her outward vivacity lay the lingering shadows of past trauma, shaping her life in profound ways. Throughout her high school years, Sophia grappled with a bipolar disorder diagnosis, leading to periods of depression interspersed with manic episodes. These mood swings, marked by intense shifts between euphoria and melancholy, often clouded her judgment and impacted her behavior. Though she diligently sought treatment, including medication and therapy, managing the symptoms proved challenging. Despite her efforts, there was no definitive cure for bipolar disorder, posing ongoing hurdles for Sophia and her family. The illness significantly disrupted her daily life, manifesting in unpredictable behavior and tumultuous relationships with those around her. In 2015, Sophia crossed paths with Austin, a vibrant individual whose charm captivated her instantly. Their ensuing 3-year relationship, however, proved tumultuous for Sophia and her mother, Michelle. Austin's volatile nature, fueled by his use of anabolic steroids, frequently led to heated arguments and even physical altercations, often initiated by Sophia due to her mental health struggles. Despite discovering Austin's infidelity and ending the relationship, Sophia continued to engage with him sporadically. Despite the challenges she faced, Sophia endeavored to forge ahead. Briefly delving into modeling for a local company provided a financial boost for her education. Eventually, she graduated as a massage therapist and secured a position at the Red Door, an upscale spa within a luxurious hotel. It was there that she met Spencer Mugford, her 20-year-old colleague. Spencer, hailing from Florida, shared Sophia's passion for the sea and boasted a promising future. Despite their mutual interests and undeniable connection, their relationship faced opposition from their respective families due to the frequent turmoil surrounding them. Michelle, Sophia's mother, expressed deep concern for Sophia's well-being due to her frequent meetings with Austin and their regular alcohol consumption, which had become almost daily. Despite Sophia and Spencer deciding to remain friends after their relationship ended, the exact reason remains unclear, though Sophia may have rekindled things with Austin. Despite this, Sophia and Spencer continued spending a lot of time together, both at work and outside, including their last day together. After fishermen discovered Spencer's body following days of searching, his family published an obituary in local media. Sophia's family did the same, but continued searching, holding on to hope. They tried to recall the events leading to the disappearance, but no new information emerged. Uncertainty surrounded any additional calls from Spencer's phone beyond those to Michelle's number, as his phone was never recovered. And the police didn't release cell operator records. Cameras at the lighthouse and campus were reportedly out of order, providing no video recordings of the events. It was also revealed that the lighthouse wasn't checked despite the couple's disappearance. In July 2018, Sophia McKenna's close relatives established a Facebook page titled, "Searching for Sophia McKenna to maintain public awareness of the case." The page facilitated the sharing of information, brochures, and pleas for any relevant details from the public. A peculiar incident occurred weeks after the disappearance, when Michelle received a money request from Sophia's social media account. Given that the police had Sophia's phone, this message raised suspicions of potential hacking. The inquiry into Spencer's demise and Sophia's vanishing reached a standstill. Official findings from the authorities remained inconclusive. Unofficially, various theories regarding the event circulated. Among them, One implicated Austin, Sophia's former beau, suggesting his potential involvement in the disappearance of the young pair. Speculation arose that Austin might have assaulted Sophia, with assistance from his companions in disposing of Spencer. Their turbulent relationship, marked by frequent arguments and physical altercations, became a topic of public discourse. Michelle, Sophia's mother, bore witness to several of their conflicts. A month preceding the disappearance, significant turmoil erupted when Sophia uncovered Austin's infidelity on May 8, 2018, prompting the termination of their relationship. In what could have been an act of retribution or a fresh start, Sophia embarked on a relationship with another individual, bringing him to her residence. Austin, incensed, hurried to her abode, where neighbors observed him vehemently banging and kicking the door, hurling invectives at Sophia. After approximately 15 minutes of silence, assuming Austin had departed, Sophia opened the door, only to find him still there, attempting to force his way in. Fortunately, Sophia managed to swiftly shut the door. Neighbors overheard his threats to harm her if she didn't comply. By then, law enforcement and Michelle had arrived, and Austin was apprehended. The following day, May 9th, a restraining order was put into effect. In her testimony, recounted prior assaults by Austin and presented photographic evidence of her injuries. She expressed apprehension for her safety due to his stalking. The restraining order prohibited Austin from being in close proximity to Sophia. However, Sophia later experienced remorse, leading to a revision of the restrictions. Now, Austin was only forbidden from entering her residence. The individual accompanying Sophia at the time declined to divulge his identity and initially refused to cooperate with the authorities. Michelle initially asserted it was Spencer with Sophia, but later recanted her statement. Nonetheless, a trusted colleague of Sophia revealed the true identity of her companion. Colleagues of Sophia and Spencer confirmed their romantic involvement, behaving as a couple both at work and in social settings. Witnesses also recounted an incident at a hotel where Austin, Sophia's ex, made a public threat against her. Nevertheless, Austin and his father joined in the search efforts for the missing duo, employing a private helicopter and distributing flyers featuring their images throughout the city. Austin took to social media, proclaiming Sophia as his girlfriend of 3 years, and clarifying that her relationship with Spencer was purely platonic. This focus on their relationship, rather than her disappearance, struck many as peculiar. On July 10th, a memorial in Sophia's honor was arranged by her loved ones. Austin attended the gathering, accompanied by Michelle, and later shared a since-deleted post online. "Rest in peace, baby. We'll meet again soon." According to Austin's account to the authorities, he spent the entirety of May 26th with Sophia, even defying a court order to meet with her, and they had plans for the following day. A friend of Austin reported that around 3 a.m. on the night of the incident, Austin messaged Sophia, claiming to be at the gym with a friend, though the plausibility of this was questioned as gyms are typically closed at that time. Austin's family asserts he was at home before purportedly heading to the gym. An undisclosed witness mentioned Austin and his brother being invited to a party that day. While initially intending to go, Austin later cited fatigue and backed out. These discrepancies cast doubt on Austin's whereabouts during Sophia and Spencer's disappearance, leaving unanswered questions. Described as volatile, possibly exacerbated by alleged steroid use, Austin's acquaintances raised concerns about his temperament. There were speculations of Austin, his brother, and a friend having connections with the local police force. Additionally, rumors circulated about a family member of Austin being married to the police chief overseeing Sophia's case, with allegations of police misconduct against him. However, the credibility of these assertions, provided by a friend of Austin with a criminal history, remains dubious. Following the dissemination of a video on Sophia by a YouTube channel focused on Long Island disappearances, Austin swiftly purged all images of them together from his social media accounts. This action spurred bewilderment, particularly given Sophia's unresolved status. One conjecture posits that Austin sought to sidestep entanglements by showcasing a new romantic interest, although the wholesale eradication of Sophia-related content seemed peculiar. Moreover, Austin's dwindling involvement in the search mere days after Sophia's vanishing raised eyebrows. During interactions with investigators, he exuded a demeanor of tranquility, displaying no overt distress over the absence of a close acquaintance. However, such behavior alone does not warrant accusations against Austin, as individuals vary in their responses to stress. One line of thought proposes that Sophia met with foul play to prevent her testimony in a domestic violence case involving Austin. Her absence of testimony ultimately led to the dismissal of the case, mirroring events from the summer of 2018. Notably, Austin is not formally implicated in this speculation. It remains conjectural while the investigation persists. An alternative narrative contemplates the possibility that Sophia and Spencer encountered perilous individuals at the lighthouse. Despite the bustling holiday crowd, witnesses either failed to recall their presence or deemed the information insignificant, resulting in no police reports. Sophia's mother speculated about abduction or human trafficking, though no evidence or ransom demands substantiate these notions. Law enforcement also entertained the scenario of an accident stemming from reckless choices. The young couple embarked on an ill-equipped boat sans life jackets into turbulent currents. Upon reaching the lighthouse, they secured the boat with Spencer's t-shirt, documented their visit, only to realize the boat had drifted away, banking on Spencer's swimming proficiency. Spencer's misjudgment of the water's coldness might have been critical. The obscurity, often altering perceptions of distance, possibly misled him into believing the boat was nearer. Exhausted from his day's labor and the swim to the lighthouse, Spencer faced the peril of drowning. Upon realizing Spencer's absence, Sophia attempted to contact her mother for aid. In a state of desperation, she could have leaped in to rescue Spencer, risking her own life. Despite Sophia's lack of swimming prowess, the influence of alcohol might have driven her to an irrational decision. Another scenario suggests she might have been traversing the lighthouse's narrow ledge, searching for Spencer, only to trip, plummeting with her phone into the water, ultimately succumbing to the current. While these theories persist, they lack official validation and suspects, circulating primarily on social media. Sophia's loved ones persist in their quest for her, yearning for answers. In 2019, an independent detective stumbled upon bones near the shore, promptly alerting the authorities. Regrettably, the bones were dismissed as animal remains upon police inspection, foregoing forensic analysis due to cost constraints. Many facets of the case raise suspicions, warranting a thorough inquiry. The unresolved disappearance of Sophia, a cherished member of a grieving family, demands relentless search efforts. Though bodies of other missing persons have been found in these waters, Sophia's remains elusive. No fresh leads have emerged, leaving the enigma of that fateful night at the lighthouse unresolved. Caitlin Markham was born on August 16, 1989 in Fairfield, Ohio. She grew up in a loving family with her parents and younger sister and was surrounded by many friends. Even as a child, Caitlin had a gift for making connections. She could approach the shyest kids on the playground and have them laughing and playing with her in no time. Caitlin was also a creative soul who loved singing, drawing, and basically anything related to art. Her passion shaped her career path. After high school, she enrolled in a local university to study graphic design. The summer of 2011 was supposed to be a turning point in Caitlin's life. She was preparing for her final exams and planning a big move to Colorado with her fiancé, John. The couple had been together for 6 years and got engaged the year before. They dreamed of starting their life together in a new city and were looking forward to getting married after the move. On the morning of August 14th, Caitlin was supposed to go to her shift at the bridal shop where she worked part-time. That day, her loved ones tried reaching out to her, but she didn't respond to any calls or messages. Soon, her family began to worry and contacted Caitlin's workplace, only to find out that she hadn't shown up for her shift that morning. This was highly unusual. Caitlin was always in touch and had never missed work without letting someone know. Still, her family initially thought she might be busy with someone else and couldn't get back to them. They decided to wait it out. But as evening approached and there was still no word from Caitlin, their concern grew to a breaking point. Her fiancé John decided to stop by her apartment after work to check if everything was okay. Caitlin's car was parked in front of the small apartment complex where she lived. But when John entered the apartment, which was unlocked, he only found her dog inside. There was no sign of Caitlin, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary to suggest that something bad had happened. Despite this, the fact that she hadn't been in touch all day was deeply concerning to everyone who knew her. So John decided to call the police. He explained that his fiancée hadn't been in contact since the morning and they sent a patrol officer. After searching Caitlin's apartment, the officer found no signs of a break-in, struggle, or anything to indicate a crime. But one particular thing did stand out as suspicious. Caitlin's keys were inside, along with her wallet and ID. Given that she wasn't at home, this raised red flags for the officer. If Caitlin had left on her own, she would have at least taken her keys and locked the door behind her. John said that he last saw Caitlin the night before. They had been hanging out at her place with a mutual friend. After his friend left, John headed to a party with some other friends, while Caitlin decided to stay home because it was already late. A few hours later, John returned to his own home, where he lived with his mom. He and Caitlin exchanged a few messages, but after that, she stopped replying. John mentioned that he texted her every morning and always got a response. Except this time. Investigators spoke with Kaylee's friends and family, but none of them had been in contact with her since the previous evening. Everyone insisted that Caitlin wouldn't have just taken off without a word. It was completely out of character for her. She was focused on her final exams, and her birthday was only a few days away, which she planned to celebrate at a local restaurant with her loved ones. With all this information in hand, the police began to suspect that something bad might have happened to Caitlin and decided to launch a search operation. They brought in over 100 volunteers, divided them into groups, and started combing through the city. Her family and friends also prepared flyers with information about Caitlin, which were soon posted on nearly every street. Meanwhile, detectives were looking for any leads that they could find. Naturally, they started by investigating Caitlin's fiancé, John. On the first day, the police noticed some small scratches on his neck, but John explained that he had accidentally scratched himself while shaving. They also asked him to take a voice stress test, which basically analyzes recorded answers for any signs of deception. The results were inconclusive, but the detectives couldn't determine if they indicated that John was lying, or simply anxious about his fiancée's disappearance. From the start, he was actively involved in the search efforts, answered all the police's questions, and even gave multiple interviews to local news outlets, which had already begun covering the case. The investigators then verified John's alibi, confirming that he was indeed at a party with friends that night. They were also able to corroborate his account of returning home afterward and watching a movie on his laptop by reviewing the data on his computer. The detective spoke with a mutual friend who had visited Caitlin and John that evening, and he confirmed that he was indeed at her place. He mentioned that they talked about the couple's upcoming move, Caitlin's exams, and just chatted. However, he did note that Caitlin seemed quieter than usual, spending most of the evening studying on her laptop. He assumed she was simply stressed about the upcoming exams, which were only a few weeks away. Based on this information, the likelihood of John's involvement seemed slim, and investigators shifted their focus to other leads. After obtaining a warrant to track Caitlin's phone, they discovered that it had been turned off at 12:06 a.m., and there had been no activity since. They also saw that she had sent John a photo about half an hour earlier, which aligned with his account. Despite their efforts, no further traces of Caitlin were found, so the police doubled down on the search. In the days that followed, even more volunteers joined the effort, and national media began covering her disappearance. Search teams scoured forests, bodies of water, and abandoned buildings, but nothing yielded any results. Weeks went by, and despite the ongoing search, the police found no trace of Caitlin. John continued to be heavily involved in the search efforts, but as time passed, more and more people in the town started to suspect that he might have had something to do with his fiancée's disappearance. Eventually, these rumors reached John himself, and he addressed the accusations, stating that all he wants is to bring Caitlin home and that he didn't have time to focus on such allegations. The investigators also made it clear that they had no solid reasons to suspect John. His alibi checked out. He had allowed them to search his home without a warrant and consistently cooperated with the police on every request, doing everything they'd asked. Still, John admitted that the accusations sometimes frustrated him. Once, while putting up flyers on the street, a woman approached him and started talking about the case. She mentioned that most people thought the boyfriend was probably the one who did it, without realizing she was actually talking to him. The search for Caitlin continued for several months, but eventually the investigators had to call it off. Despite their efforts, they hadn't found a single clue, so the police decided to focus on the investigation and follow up on any new leads. By that time, Caitlin's case had gained national attention and the detectives had received hundreds of tips. They thoroughly looked into each one, but none brought them any closer to finding the missing young woman. The authorities also kept increasing the reward for information, which reached $50,000 within the first few months. The case remained cold for almost a year, until a rather unexpected twist. Police in Miami arrested a 28-year-old man for assaulting a college student. At first, this seemed unrelated, until detectives working on Caitlin's case discovered that this man had been living right across the street from her apartment complex at the time of her disappearance. Detectives went to Miami to question him and establish his whereabouts on the night Caitlin vanished. But after a thorough investigation, they concluded that he had no opportunity to commit the crime, and he was ruled out as a suspect. This case remained cold for another year until April 10, 2013. On that day, a man from a small town called Cedar Lake in Indiana went searching for scrap metal along a road near a wooded area. As he walked past some trees, he noticed a bundle of black tarp. He decided to inspect it and, to his horror, discovered human bones inside. He immediately called the police and the officer sent the remains to a lab for analysis. During the search of that area, they also found another bag which contained only a skull. The experts quickly determined that the remains were indeed human and, using dental records, identified the victim. It was Caitlin. This confirmed that Caitlin had been dead all along, and the police were now certain they were dealing with a murder, as someone had dismembered her body and transported it to a neighboring state. The killer hadn't even attempted to bury the remains. They had simply been left next to a pile of trash. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, the forensic experts were unable to uncover any significant clues or determine the exact cause of death. The only notable finding was evidence of a stab wound on one of the arm bones. Although the exact cause of death could not be established, the medical examiners confirmed that it was undoubtedly a homicide. The fact that the remains were discovered in another state complicated the investigation. Police from both Indiana and Ohio had to work together, but despite their combined efforts, they made little progress. They did conclude that the body was likely kept elsewhere before being moved to the woods. It's possible the killer feared it would be discovered and decided to relocate the remains to a more remote spot. In 2015, Caitlin's father decided to hire a private investigator because he felt that the local police department was not putting enough effort into solving the case. The investigator conducted his own investigation, speaking with Caitlin's relatives and friends, and eventually identified 2 potential suspects. He passed this information on to the police, but they chose not to disclose the detectives' findings. That same year, the reward for information increased to $75,000. Yet this still did not bring investigators any closer to solving the mystery. Caitlin's father fought to have this case transferred from the local police to the county authorities. And by the end of 2015, he finally succeeded. A new team of detectives took over and began working on the case basically from scratch. In 2016, detectives told reporters that they had a prime suspect whom they believed to be responsible for the murder, but they lacked any evidence to make an arrest. Because of this, they did not reveal the suspect's identity, and the investigation stalled once again for years. In 2018, police in a town just a few miles from Caitlin's home discovered the body of another young woman. The circumstances of this crime bore a striking resemblance to Caitlin's case, prompting investigators to explore a possible connection. They soon identified a suspect named Michael, who had reportedly stalked the victim for weeks before killing her. Detectives began to investigate any potential links between Michael and Caitlin, and initially they found none. But soon they stumbled upon a surprising detail. In one of the killer's social media photos from a music festival, he was seen standing next to Caitlin's fiancé, John. When police questioned John about this, he confirmed that he had met Michael at the festival, but stated that they had barely interacted. Despite the intriguing coincidence, investigators couldn't uncover any further connection between Michael and Caitlin, making it impossible to link him to her murder. This continued until 2023, when investigators unexpectedly announced the first arrest in Caitlin's case. Police took a man named Jonathan into custody. They informed the media that Jonathan was a close friend of both Caitlin and her fiancé. At first, the police kept the details of the arrest under wraps, but 2 months later, they made another shocking move. Caitlin's fiancé John was arrested on suspicion of her murder. Only after this did investigators share with the public what they had uncovered in the past few years. When the case was handed over to the county police, the new detectives started from scratch, going through all the existing evidence. Right away, they found John's behavior suspicious, especially his 911 call. The investigators felt his words sounded rehearsed, almost like he was reading from a script. They got the same vibe from his initial statements to the patrol officer. Next, the detectives looked at recordings of conversations with mutual friends of Caitlin and John. Many of these friends had shared some concerning observations back in 2011. According to their accounts, in the months leading up to her disappearance, Caitlin expressed that there were serious issues in her relationship with John. So serious that she even considered breaking up with him. She told her friends that John had started using drugs, became more aggressive, and was constantly watching adult content of a quite disturbing nature. Another interesting aspect of the case came from witness statements that had been in the police's possession since 2011. On the night Caitlin disappeared, 2 teenagers snuck out for a party around 2 a.m. As they passed John's mother's house, they noticed 2 cars pull up with their headlights off. John got out from one of the cars, went inside the house, and quickly returned before getting behind the wheel. Both cars then drove away, still not turning the lights on. These statements contradicted John's alibi, who claimed he had been home watching a movie. But investigators found out that his alibi relied on open tabs on his laptop related to that movie, but there were no concrete proofs confirming he was actually at home watching it. So, it turned out John didn't really have any solid alibi. On the contrary, 2 witnesses had seen him that night under very suspicious circumstances. But that wasn't all. It turned out that on the night Caitlin disappeared, John's phone had been turned off just 2 minutes before Caitlin's and remained inactive for 15 hours. John also deleted several messages he had sent to his fiancée that evening, leaving their content a mystery. Initially, he claimed that Caitlin hadn't responded to his good morning message, but was later revealed that he never sent such a message at all. Another interesting detail was neighbors' reports about hearing some noise from Caitlin's apartment that night. According to their initial statement, they heard arguing, banging, and then someone quietly repeating the word no. John, on the other hand, insisted there was no argument between them, and the original team of investigators, for some reason, didn't find this odd at all. After reviewing all this information, the detectives concluded that John had been the only serious suspect from the start, but they needed more evidence. They re-interviewed Caitlin's friends, which led to a surprising discovery. One female friend revealed that just a few months after Caitlin's disappearance, John confessed he had romantic feelings for her. This revelation shocked her, especially since John had still been participating in the search efforts for his missing fiancée and expressing how much he missed Caitlin. The detectives also re-interviewed all the witnesses and eventually obtained a search warrant for John's mother's house where he had been living at the time of the murder. There, they discovered a black tarp identical to the one that had covered Caitlin's remains. In his room, the police found several disturbing poems handwritten by John. One poem contained a troubling inner dialogue. Deep down, I love her. You have to kill her. But I love her. She has to die. The detectives also discovered that John had been quite aggressive toward his new wife. By that time, he had a family and children, and the police found video footage showing him yelling at his wife while holding their young daughter. Finally, the detectives determined that the location where Caitlin's remains were found was all along the route to John's father's farm, a place he visited frequently. This fact confirmed his familiarity with the area. Putting all this information together, the detectives decided to confront John. But he denied any involvement in the murder. When they pointed out all the suspicious details and inconsistencies, he calmly responded that they were merely circumstantial. Unfortunately for investigators, he was right. They understood that with this limited evidence, they were unlikely to secure a conviction, as there was no solid proof linking him to the crime. However, they could arrest him for providing false statements based on witness accounts that placed him leaving his house at 2 a.m. But there was another complication. Witnesses reported that John wasn't alone. Another car had pulled up with him. Following this lead, detectives focused on his friend, Jonathan, suspecting he might be the other person. They soon discovered that Jonathan was also in that group photo from the music festival, alongside John and a convicted murderer who had killed another young woman. Reviewing Jonathan's conversations with the police in light of their findings, the detectives decided to arrest him for providing false statements, although they didn't disclose specific details at the time. 2 months later, they arrested John himself, but the case still hung by a thread due to the lack of substantial evidence. The detectives seemed to hope that Jonathan would give them a confession. At that point, they believed someone had helped the fiancé dispose of the body, and it seemed his friend was involved. But both men continued to deny any connection to the murder, and John posted a $1 million bond securing his release until the trial. Given all this, the investigators took a desperate step. Realizing that a jury trial would likely lead to John's acquittal, they decided to offer him a deal. The prosecution agreed to reduce the charge of third-degree murder in exchange for a confession, and John accepted the offer. In June 2024, he appeared before a judge and pleaded guilty, but refused to share any details of the incident, as it wasn't required under the terms of the deal. In the end, the judge sentenced him to the maximum possible term for that charge, which in Ohio was only 3 years. This verdict understandably outraged the entire country, but the judge had no power to change it. Had John not accepted the plea deal, he could have easily avoided even that sentence, as there was simply no evidence for first-degree murder charges. As for his friend Jonathan, all charges against him were dropped for the same reasons. It seemed the detectives were unable to find any evidence that he had assisted in disposing of the body. After the sentencing, Caitlin's father expressed that the biggest concern was not knowing the full truth behind his daughter's murder, rather than the actual prison sentence. He admitted that he initially doubted John's guilt, but had gradually shifted toward believing it over the years. He recalled how John had stayed in touch with him and even hugged him at Caitlin's funeral, despite being the one responsible for her death. Shortly after John was placed in prison, his cellmate contacted the police and claimed that John had told him some details about the murder. According to the inmate, there had been an argument between them that night, and John had lost control. He attacked Caitlin and strangled her, then panicked and even thought about calling the police. He also considered staging the scene to make it look like Caitlin had done it herself, but ultimately decided to dispose of her body instead. But the detectives were hesitant to believe this account. They assumed that John might have told this story because it actually aligned with the existing evidence, but whether he was telling the truth was still an open question. The police believe that the murder could have been premeditated rather than an impulsive act of rage. One detective who interrogated John was convinced that the man was a psychopath. He stated that he had spoken to many criminals throughout his career, but John stood out among all of them. Despite all this, there was no way to change the sentence, and John would be released in 2027 when he turned 39. The victim's parents had given up hope of ever learning the full truth. Even if John decided to confess, they would likely struggle to believe him. They were left to watch as he served a minimal sentence behind bars and would eventually return to society, where his actions could potentially harm others. The police are also continuing to investigate a possible connection between John, his friend, and the man convicted of killing another woman. They do not rule out the possibility that the trio could have bonded over their twisted fantasies and shared tendencies toward violence, but there is no evidence to support this theory yet. Before Paul met Joanne, he had been in serious relationships with women more than once. For example, in 1993, during his university years, he was with Carrie Thompson. Although he didn't stay with her for long, this relationship revealed his violent tendencies. Carrie told the police about how Paul could switch during an argument and become aggressive, beating the walls and holding Carrie by force. This was just the beginning. In 1999, Jenny Mary Clark appeared in his life. They wasted no time, and just 2 weeks after meeting, the wedding bells were already ringing. However, their marriage began with a real nightmare. On their wedding night, Paul attacked Jenny, and this was not a one-off incident. He continued to beat her and even strangled her into unconsciousness. Investigators claimed that this abusive behavior was repeated with Joanne. Despite this situation, Paul and Jenny decided to have a baby. Their daughter, Chloe, was born in 2000, and they divorced shortly after. When Chloe was 5 years old, Jenny met Joanne and immediately realized that Joanne was too naive for such a rude man and would face a tough battle with Paul. In 2002, he broke up with Jenny and began dating Joanne Nelson. Katie, Joanne's sister, said that Joanne most likely did not know about his criminal history. Otherwise, she would not have continued the relationship or wanted children with him. Their story began on the streets where Paul worked as a security guard in bars and clubs. He was 27 and already experienced in relationships, while Joanne was just starting her journey into adulthood at the age of 19. Despite the age difference, they found support in each other, running away from their parents' control and looking for their own space. At first, they lived with Paul's mother, and then they could afford to buy their own house. But happiness was slowly disappearing, fading away like smoke from a fire. The days turned gray and the tension grew between them. For Joanne, everything had become too mundane and boring. Their differences began to affect the relationship. She loved order while he did not give it much thought. On February 14, 2005, Joanne did not come to work. This was unusual and caused immediate concern. As the investigation revealed more and more information, the previously quiet and peaceful town was overtaken by a wave of shocking lies and deception. Joanne Nelson, a cheerful and bright young woman, always put the happiness of her loved ones above her own. As a child, she lived with her parents in the town of Hull, also known as Kingston upon Hull, on the east coast of Yorkshire, England. Her mother, Jean, was a teaching assistant, and her father, Charlie, worked as an engineer for the city council. It was in this town that Joanne grew up and became who she was. Joanne had a bright personality and was successful both academically and socially. She was an active athlete who loved netball, lacrosse, and swimming. She lived happily, enjoying her youth, but always harbored a deep desire to create her own family. She initially tried her hand at medicine, but the emotional toll of being a nurse proved too difficult for her. Her loved ones remember how she would come home saddened by the suffering of her patients. Later, Joanne considered working abroad, but ultimately chose to work at an employment center in Hull to be closer to her family and friends. She found fulfillment in making people's lives better by helping them find jobs and improve their skills. Joanne's dedication and kindness left a lasting impact on those around her, making her absence even more profound and alarming. When she did not show up for work that fateful February day. On Valentine's Day 2005, Joanne Nelson vanished without a trace, turning a day meant for love into a day of horror and mystery. Her disappearance was a nightmare for her parents. When her boyfriend reported her missing to the police, a sense of foreboding filled the air. That night turned dark and ominous, leaving Joanne's family and friends enveloped in fear and uncertainty. Instead of enjoying the evening with his beloved, Paul found himself speaking with the police. He claimed that the last time he saw Joanne was when she was asleep, and upon his return from work, she was gone. It was as if she had vanished into thin air, leaving only shadows of fear and hope behind. At 22 years old, Joanne's sudden disappearance caused great distress among her loved ones. The situation became even more perplexing. When she missed significant events, such as her best friend's father's funeral and her sister Katie's 19th birthday, the police swiftly launched a large-scale search operation involving numerous law enforcement officers, military personnel, and volunteers. Joanne's father was vocal about his suspicions regarding Paul, questioning how he could be involved in the disappearance of such a responsible young woman. Katie, although aware of her father's concerns, found it hard to believe that Paul had any role in Joanne's vanishing. The family's worry and confusion only deepened as days turned into weeks without any sign of Joanne. Paul threw himself into the search efforts, collaborating with volunteers, concerned relatives, and friends. Despite lacking family consent, he granted multiple interviews to the press, keen to aid in the search. When questioned by a reporter over the phone, Paul vehemently denied any wrongdoing in Joanne's disappearance. He adamantly professed his love for her, asserting that he could never harm her. However, discrepancies emerged between his spoken words and his facial expressions. Expert Cliff Lansley scrutinized Paul's demeanor during a televised interview, identifying peculiarities. Notably, Paul failed to close his eyes while discussing Joanne, an anomaly for someone grappling with grief. Moreover, he displayed no signs of tears, raising suspicions. Further scrutiny came from Ray Higgins, the head of the investigation team at Humberside Police. Higgins reported observing nail marks on the back of Paul's hand, leading authorities to consider his potential involvement in Joanne's disappearance or death. Eventually, Paul's mother, unable to bear the emotional turmoil any longer, divulged crucial information about Paul's actions to the authorities, potentially shedding light on Joanne's fate. Upon learning of the accusations, Paul didn't attempt to refute his culpability. Just 6 days after Joanne's disappearance, he found himself in police custody. During a grueling interrogation, the truth emerged. On that fateful Valentine's Day in 2005, Paul committed the unthinkable act of ending Joanne's life in their own home. Paul recounted a tumultuous argument that escalated to irreparable heights. Joanne's constant criticism, particularly regarding household chores, served as the catalyst. According to Paul, Joanne's request for help with the washing machine triggered his anger and shame at his perceived inadequacy. Matters worsened when Joanne declared her intention to leave him and demanded the sale of their home for €110,000, further fueling Paul's rage. In a fit of fury, Paul confessed to the police, admitting to strangling Joanne with his bare hands. Subsequently, he displayed chilling composure as he meticulously orchestrated the aftermath, intending to conceal his heinous deed. He craftily devised a plan, seeking to fabricate Joanne's sudden disappearance. With calculated precision, Paul proceeded to carry out his scheme. He engaged in casual interactions with neighbors and discussed banal topics like acquiring a pet, all while concealing the darkness within him. Surveillance footage captured his unervingly composed demeanor as he purchased supplies, a testament to his disturbingly calm facade. Armed with garbage bags, rubber gloves, and disinfectant spray, executed his plan methodically. He bound Joanne's limbs, encased her in bags, and sealed them with duct tape. Then, without hesitation, he transported her lifeless body to her vehicle, his audacity matched only by the magnitude of his crime. The audacious act unfolded in broad daylight, revealing Paul's cunning and deceitful nature. With chilling composure, he concealed his heinous deed from unsuspecting onlookers, demonstrating his ability to manipulate those around him effortlessly. After concealing Joanne's lifeless body in her own vehicle, Paul embarked on a calculated journey. Driving approximately 75 miles to the remote Bradbury woodland near Winteringham in North Yorkshire, Paul carefully orchestrated each step. With meticulous precision, he carried Joanne's body through the dense forest, seeking a secluded burial site among the towering pines. Utilizing twigs to obscure the makeshift grave, buried what he perceived as the love of his life. Returning to the victim's car, Paul resumed his facade of normalcy, showing no remorse or acknowledgement of his monstrous actions. He even fabricated a fake phone conversation with Joanne to divert suspicion, further highlighting his cold-blooded demeanor. Despite his attempts to deceive, Paul's consistent actions betrayed an alarming level of planning and premeditation. In the subsequent investigation, Paul's memory conveniently faltered regarding the exact location of Joanne's burial site. Detectives, led by the tenacious Ray Higgins, embarked on a painstaking 6-week search across 3 counties. Finally, on March 24th, after 39 days of agonizing uncertainty, the grim truth came to light. In a solemn operation led by Detective Phil Gadd, Joanne's remains were discovered in Bransby, near York. Trembling with nerves, the search party followed Paul's descriptions until they stumbled upon the telltale signs: a garbage bag concealed beneath branches. Within it lay the heartbreaking evidence: Joanne's body wrapped in plastic, a tragic confirmation of the family's worst fears. March 24th marked the end of a harrowing ordeal for Joanne's family, bringing closure to their anguished search while cementing the grim reality they had dreaded all along. Paul's facade of strength hid a dark history of sexual violence against women, a chilling truth kept hidden from Joanne's family and the public until the trial. During his time working as a security guard at the club, he ominously referred to himself as a psychopath, sending shivers down the spines of those who knew him. Witnesses familiar with Paul from the gym recounted instances where he instigated fights in clubs and bars, painting a disturbing picture of his character. As the trial unfolded, more unsettling details emerged. It was revealed that Paul had been experimenting with steroids in a misguided attempt to sculpt his physique into that of a bodybuilder. His friends disclosed that he had battled alcoholism in the past, and his violent outbursts were likely exacerbated by his steroid use. Paul's educational background provided little insight into the darkness lurking beneath his seemingly ordinary facade. He attended Sydney Smith School before enrolling at Howell College, where he successfully completed a program in constructional engineering. Despite his academic achievements, Paul's journey took a sinister turn when he pursued a degree in horticulture at Bishop Burton College, completing it at the tender age of 17. These revelations painted a chilling portrait of a man whose outward appearance belied the deep-seated demons lurking within. Paul's transformation from a seemingly ordinary student to a perpetrator of unspeakable violence left Joanne's family and the community reeling, grappling with the horrifying reality of the darkness that dwelled within him. Paul's journey through life took him from Saudi Arabia to Somerton Road, where he worked diligently in various industries alongside his father, Peter Dyson. Together, they navigated the maintenance industry, honed their gardening skills, and delved into the intricacies of machining. Paul's employment history painted a picture of a young man eager to carve out his path in the world of work. However, behind the veneer of normalcy lurked a disturbing truth. At the tender age of 15, Paul's life took a dark turn when he crossed paths with Colin Allen, a martial arts expert with whom he formed an unlikely bond. It was to Colin that Paul confessed to a heinous crime, a confession that ultimately led to his arrest. Paul's acquaintances shed light on his complex character. While some saw him as charming and attractive to women, others witnessed a more troubling side to his personality. He often leveraged his position as a security guard to forge connections with women from higher social echelons, revealing a distorted perception of himself and his interactions. Colleagues and relatives offered contrasting portraits of Paul, depicting him as both outspoken and boastful about his athletic prowess, yet also capable of making disturbing statements. Shockingly, Paul's family recounted instances where he proudly boasted about his father's involvement in the deaths of 2 individuals. This seemingly incredulous claim, however, proved to be rooted in reality. Paul's father, Peter Dyson, had indeed served time in prison for the manslaughter of 22-year-old John Dickinson, a man with whom his wife had been unfaithful. The tragic events of 1967 cast a shadow over Paul's upbringing, exposing him to the grim realities of life and death at a young age. Through Paul's tumultuous journey, a complex and unsettling portrait emerged, revealing the interplay between family history, personal choices, and the darkest depths of human nature. In 1974, a mere 2 days after Paul entered the world, tragedy struck with haunting consequences. Peter Dyson, his father, found himself entangled in a fatal accident. Behind the wheel, he collided with 47-year-old Gordon Kell, who was returning home after jubilantly celebrating a silver wedding anniversary. In a chilling turn of events, Peter fled the scene, leaving Gordon to perish on the roadside. Despite the gravity of the situation, Paul idolized his father, viewing him through a lens of admiration and heroism. The untimely demise of Peter in 2000, succumbing to a heart attack in the midst of their life in Saudi Arabia, left an indelible mark on Paul's psyche. It cast a shadow over his existence, shaping the trajectory of his fate in ways both profound and ominous. As the trial unfolded on November 7, 2005, a hushed courtroom bore witness to a startling revelation. Paul, in a dramatic turn of events, stunned onlookers by entering a guilty plea. Joanne's family, bracing themselves for a protracted and grueling legal battle, found themselves thrust into a realm of disbelief and uncertainty. In a moment of collective astonishment, they whispered affirmations as Paul's admission reverberated through the chamber. Throughout the proceedings, Paul maintained a stoic demeanor, his gaze fixed straight ahead or cast downward, deliberately avoiding the piercing stares of Joanne's grieving loved ones and the scrutiny of law enforcement. Not a flicker of emotion crossed his impassive countenance, not even during the formal announcement of the charges against him. His lawyer, Harry Barrell, stood before the court, acknowledging the gravity of the situation. With unwavering resolve, he conceded that there could be no excuse for the heinous act perpetrated by his client. In the wake of Paul's shocking confession, a pall of solemnity descended upon the courtroom, marking the beginning of a harrowing journey toward justice and closure. On Tuesday, November 8th, nearly 10 months after the tragic murder, Paul received his sentence, life imprisonment with a minimum term of 16 years. Remarkably, just 14 years later, in November 2019, at the age of 45, Paul found himself transferred to an open prison and recommended for day release. The parole board cited Paul's active engagement in self-awareness programs and successful completion of an intensive interpersonal relationship improvement program. Recalling the day of Joanne's disappearance, Katie was struck by Paul's behavior. She now regrets offering him comfort when he appeared at her doorstep. Later, when Paul wandered off, Katie, consumed by worry, searched for him. Finding him at the bus stop, she squeezed his hands in an attempt to provide support as he sat there, overcome with emotion. She even embraced him, hoping to offer solace. Reflecting on the moment, admitted she hadn't initially noticed the scratches on his arm. But upon later reflection, she couldn't forgive herself for missing them. The easing of Paul's detention conditions and the prospect of day release stirred deep emotional turmoil within Joanne's family. Katie, speaking to the media, expressed their sense of loss and confusion in the face of this news. Paul's impending release dredged up painful memories of Joanne's untimely death, leaving the family grappling with a sense of injustice. Despite their belief that Paul didn't deserve such leniency for his heinous actions. Morgan Nick was born on September 12, 1988 in the small town of Ozark, Arkansas. Shortly after her birth, her parents welcomed a son and a year later, another daughter. Morgan had a wonderful relationship with her younger siblings. They could spend hours playing together and the little ones admired her in every way. When she was just starting to learn how to read, Morgan would practice with children's books, reading bedtime stories to her brother. She was also an animal lover from a young age, and would often tell her parents that she wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. In elementary school, joined the Girl Scouts where she had fun making crafts, going on nature trips, and just enjoying time with the other girls. When Morgan was 6, her parents decided to get a divorce, but the kids still got to spend lots of time with their dad. In early summer of 1995, a family friend invited Morgan's mom to a Little League baseball game in a nearby town called Alma. At first, she thought about declining. After all, it was a Friday evening and the stadium was nearly 30 miles away. But in the end, she decided to go and take Morgan along, figuring it might be a fun way to spend time together. On the evening of June 9th, Morgan's mom left the younger kids with their grandmother and headed to the stadium. Although it was a small venue, about 300 people had shown up for the game, including parents and other kids. She found her friends and they settled in to watch the game. But it didn't take long for Morgan to get bored. After a while, she noticed 2 kids she knew and they invited her to come play and catch fireflies near the stadium. At first, her mom was hesitant to let her go. It was already getting dark and they were visiting the town for the first time, so she was worried that something could happen to her. But her friends reassured her that their kids played near the stadium all the time and there was nothing to worry about. Reluctantly, she let Morgan go, and the girl ran off with the other kids. They stopped by a small hill, still within her mom's sight, and she kept an eye on Morgan every now and then. About 15 minutes later, the baseball game ended, and the players started heading toward the bleachers to meet their parents. Morgan's mom looked away for just a few seconds, but when she glanced back, her daughter was already gone. The two kids she'd been playing with were walking towards the bleachers, and Morgan wasn't with them. The woman approached the kids and asked if they had seen her daughter. They explained that before heading back to the stadium, they had stopped to shake the sand out of their shoes after playing. They went over to a car in the parking lot, leaned on it, and emptied their shoes, with Morgan standing behind the car while they were at the front. Once they were done, they started walking back to the stadium, but Morgan was nowhere to be seen. Her friends assumed she had just stayed near the car to wait for her mom, so they didn't think much of it and went on their way. Morgan's mom looked toward the parking lot and spotted her car, but there was no sign of Morgan. She rushed over and checked inside, but her daughter was nowhere to be found. Panic began to set in, and she returned to the kids, hoping they could shed some light on Morgan's disappearance. She asked them where her daughter could have gone, but they had no idea, although they did mention that they had seen a man in the parking lot while they were playing. He was standing near a red pickup truck, watching the stadium and occasionally glancing their way. At one point, he even approached them and said something, but they couldn't recall his exact words. They only remembered that he spoke with some kind of a country accent. Thinking that this man might have had something to do with her daughter's disappearance, Morgan's mom immediately called the police. 6 minutes later, officers arrived at the stadium and first spoke to the kids who had been with Morgan before she vanished. During their conversation, the police were able to get more details about the man near the stadium. Piecing together the children's accounts, the investigators concluded that he was a white man between 23 and 30 years old, around 6 feet tall with an average build, a beard, a mustache, and dark hair. The kids also remembered his vehicle quite well. It was an old red pickup truck with Arkansas plates and a white camper shell on the back. This detail struck the officers as suspicious, because a camper shell could easily fit an adult, let alone a child. Another odd thing was that the camper seemed unusually short for the truck, making it look out of place for that model. This raised further suspicion that the man might be directly involved in Morgan's disappearance and could have used the camper to abduct her. The kids also mentioned that the man was wearing only jeans and had no shirt on. The officers immediately searched the parking lot, but they couldn't find any vehicle matching the description. After speaking with the kids, they began questioning everyone who was still at the stadium. However, all of the 300 attendees had been focused on the game, and none of them recalled seeing anything strange or suspicious that evening. A search around the stadium also came up empty, so the officers expanded their efforts to the nearby streets. Despite their best efforts, no trace of Morgan was found that night. Her mother was devastated. She refused to go home and ended up spending the rest of the night at the fire station. The next day, the search intensified as news of Morgan's disappearance spread quickly throughout the area, prompting dozens of volunteers to come forward. Soon, the FBI and state police joined the efforts, providing helicopters for aerial searches and creating a suspect sketch based on Morgan's friends' descriptions. The sketch, along with photos of Morgan, was distributed across the town and nearby communities in the hopes that someone would recognize the man. Initially, the authorities also thought that Morgan might have simply wandered off from the parking lot and gotten lost. But as nearly 24 hours passed without any sign of her, it became clear that if that were the case, she would have been found by then. That evening, police also began receiving alarming reports from parents who shared some disturbing stories. One woman told them that just a few hours before the baseball game, a stranger had tried to lure her 4-year-old daughter into his red pickup truck. It happened near a laundromat in Alma while the woman was inside, and her daughter was standing near the building. When the mother came out, the man drove off. She provided a description of the suspect, which matched the sketch of Morgan's possible abductor. The day after Morgan's disappearance, another report came in from a witness in Fort Smith, a town not far from Alma. He saw a man trying to lure a 9-year-old girl into a public restroom, but the girl managed to get away. Once again, the man's description matched the composite sketch based on the accounts from Morgan's friends. All of this pointed to the possibility that the person behind Morgan's disappearance might have previously attempted to abduct other victims or even successfully committed similar crimes in the past. The police focused on locating the red pickup truck matching the witness description and began checking the backgrounds of known offenders in nearby towns. Over the next few weeks, investigators received hundreds of tips about potential suspects, but they either couldn't establish a connection or confirmed that the individuals had no involvement in the crime. Meanwhile, investigators continued to comb the area around the stadium, collecting various items that could potentially be considered as evidence. They found several cigarette butts, bottles, and other objects, which were sent to the lab for DNA analysis. But in the end, the police had no clear indication whether any of these items were actually connected to Morgan's disappearance. As for the red pickup truck, the police received nearly 250 calls from witnesses across various towns and even neighboring states, all reporting sightings of similar vehicles. The problem was that a lot of residents drove similar models, and there were literally thousands of them. Investigators tried to check each owner, but once again, they found no evidence linking any of them to Morgan's disappearance. This continued for 2 weeks until the police received a surprising call. A resident of a town called Stuttgart, about a 3-hour drive from Ulm, was on his property when he noticed a man trying to break into his car. The homeowner scared him off and the intruder immediately fled. When he was running away, the witness saw that the man was holding a little girl by the hand. The police showed him the composite sketch of the suspect, and he confirmed that the person trying to get into his car looked very similar to the suspect and the girl resembled Morgan. Investigators quickly launched a large-scale operation in Stuttgart, securing an area of about 10 square miles and deploying several dozen officers. Morgan's parents immediately headed to the town, hoping their daughter would be finally found. Hundreds of volunteers, along with the police, began searching the entire town and surrounding area. Helicopters scanned from above, and search dogs tried to pick up Morgan's scent using her belongings. The search continued for 16 hours, but they found no trace of the missing girl. Eventually, the police began to doubt the witness's story. They conducted 2 polygraph tests, both of which suggested he was lying. Although the man insisted he was telling the truth, he eventually admitted that he had made up the entire story. He did see someone trying to break into his car, but he hadn't gotten a good look at the person's face and there was no little girl with him. The man was arrested for providing false information, which cost nearly a full day of search efforts and thousands of dollars. It's unclear if he faced any punishment, but such actions typically result in a serious fine or a jail sentence. Investigators found themselves back at square one, but giving up wasn't an option. They brought in 17 more officers from across the state, and the team focused on sorting through the leads that kept coming in. By then, they had over 1,500 tips, but none of them brought detectives any closer to finding Morgan. Her parents didn't give up either, but as the months went by, their hopes started to fade. About a year after Morgan disappeared, her mom found a nonprofit dedicated to finding missing children. Although she was still focused on searching for her daughter, there weren't any new clues left to follow. That's when she began helping other families who were going through similar tragedies, and she put her efforts into raising awareness about the dangers that could strike at any moment in a child's life. Over the next several years, police kept following up on various leads and questioning potential suspects, but nothing seemed to bring any progress. In 2001, 6 years after Morgan's disappearance, the FBI released an age-progressed image showing what she might look like. That same year, several well-known TV shows aired segments about her case, which led to an increase in the number of tips. Although most of these tips turned out to be dead ends, one in particular caught the investigators' attention. The caller claimed that the girl's body was buried on a property in Boonville, a small town about an hour from Ulm. The police took this tip seriously because the person provided specific details about the case that had never been made public. In early 2002, they obtained a search warrant for the property. Bringing search dogs along, they dug up the entire area, but no trace of Morgan was found. Since then, the case remained cold for nearly a decade. In 2010, police received another tip about a possible location where Morgan's abductor might have held her, this time in another state. They conducted a search, but once again, there was no evidence to suggest the girl had ever been there. Interestingly, in 2017, police returned to search the same house, but this time for a different investigation. It turned out that a man who had once lived there was in prison for crimes against minors, and authorities suspected him in another similar case. But even then, the search turned up no new clues. In 2019, a new documentary about the case was released. For the first time since Morgan's disappearance, police shared a photo of the red pickup truck believed to be connected to the abductor. The vehicle had been briefly captured on someone's camera during the game, but the poor quality and angle made it nearly impossible to make out any important details. Following the documentary's release, police reached out to the public, asking for any information about who might have owned the truck. They received a series of new tips, but despite these efforts, they still couldn't make any progress in solving the case. This continued until 2021, when investigators finally named their main suspect in the case. The man was Billy Lynx, who had come to the police's attention in the early weeks of Morgan's disappearance. Lynx had a criminal record for offenses against minors, and he owned a similar red pickup truck. However, in 1995, police could not establish any connection between him and Morgan's disappearance, even after searching his truck. During his questioning, they felt that Billy was being honest about his innocence. He was also significantly older than 30, while detectives relied on Morgan's friends' accounts that described the abductor as being younger. Now, nearly 30 years later, detectives began to look at him again. This time, they hoped that modern DNA analysis tools could uncover any traces of Morgan's presence in his vehicle. But there were some issues. Billy had passed away in 2000 while serving time for an attempted abduction. Just 2 months after Morgan's disappearance, he tried to lure another girl into his car while she was standing outside a store. Her mother scared him off and reported the incident to the police, leading to his arrest. At that time, he was 70 years old, and he died of natural causes 5 years later while still in prison. Another complication was that police had no idea where Billy's pickup truck was, or if it even still existed after nearly 3 decades. The investigators focused on tracking down the pickup truck, and after some time, they managed to trace its chain of ownership since Billy's arrest. To the surprise of the detectives, they actually found the truck. It was still running, and the current owner agreed to let the police examine it. Initially, the detectives didn't get their hopes up too high, since any DNA evidence could have easily been erased or degraded over the years. But surprisingly, forensic experts found a few hairs in the truck bed that seemed to match Morgan's hair. The samples were sent to a Texas lab, equipped with the latest DNA analysis technology for a closer look. Took 8 months, but finally there was a breakthrough. They managed to extract a DNA sample from the hair and compared it to Morgan's mother's DNA. The results indicated a close genetic match in the first degree of relation. In other words, the hair likely belonged to one of her children or siblings. Morgan's mother stated that she had never heard of Billy Lynx and had never met him in her life. Detectives also knew that no one else from Morgan's immediate family could have been in that truck, which meant that the little girl herself must have been there. On October 1st, 2024, the police held a press conference to announce that Billy Lynx was now officially considered responsible for Morgan's abduction, and they had no doubt about his involvement. Unfortunately, no one believes that Morgan could still be alive nearly 29 years after her disappearance. Investigators suspect that Billy killed her in the first few days after the abduction, but where he hid her remains is still unknown. Even though the case is considered essentially solved, the police have declared that they will continue searching for her remains. Still, without a confession from Billy, this task seems nearly impossible. Detectives are also going to look into Billy's possible involvement in other cases. Considering that he had attempted at least a few kidnappings shortly after Morgan's disappearance, the police suspect that there could be many more crimes in his past. At the time of Morgan's abduction, he was already 70 years old, and it seems likely that he had a long history of such offenses. Plus, he had served in the military during World War II, giving him certain skills that may have been used in his crimes. It's worth noting that Morgan's disappearance became one of the most well-known crimes in all of Arkansas. Authorities even decided to rename the Amber Alert system to Morgan Alert in her memory. As for her mother, she continues to help other children and families through her nonprofit organization. This work has been her way of coping with the loss of her daughter. Though deep down, she still holds on to a small hope that Morgan might somehow be alive. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.